Welcome to eThekwini Matters. I'm your host, Simphiwe Lameni, and today on the show we are joined by the acting head of Invest Durban, Mr. Russell Curtis. Mr. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Simphiwe. Good to be here. Good to be talking to the audience.
Siyajabula ukuthi ube nathi. Ngiyazi uyasazi isiZulu.
Ngifunde isiZulu kancane.
Mr. Curtis, can you please tell us about the role of Invest Durban in terms of the broader mandate of stimulating economic growth as well as attracting or creating investment opportunities in eThekwini?
Thanks, Simphiwe. Our unit is part of the economic development and planning cluster of the city. And so our responsibility is multifaceted.
Yeah.
Our particular unit, Invest Durban, we have a four-part mandate. So in essence, we have four things that we try to do for the city. Number one, investment marketing and investment promotion.
Okay.
That's of the city itself and of the catalytic projects, flagship projects, and some of the investment programs. Number two, international investment identification, attract them to Durban, and then hold their hands through all of the regulatory processes until they start spitting out widgets. So we call that FDI attraction.
Yeah.
Thirdly is existing foreign investor retention and expansion. So it's like trying to keep the plug in the bath to make sure we don't lose water out of the bath. So it's looking at some of our bigger international investors and retaining them, helping them, and when they want to expand, assist them in their expansion plans. And lastly, in that four-part mandate, we call it investment advocacy.
Okay.
That's really just trying to improve the business environment in Durban, improve the investment environment in Durban through a range of different activities.
I mean, I can imagine that you can't do that sitting here on the third floor. You have to go out there and look for investors and lure investors to Durban. Can you please tell us about some of the roadshows that you've been embarking on in terms of inviting or attracting investors to eThekwini?
Absolutely. Simphiwe, our outreach is both physical as well as digital and virtual. You know, COVID taught us all to pivot, and so we had to pivot. So we've been reaching into our source markets. That's the United Kingdom, that's the EU, that's the US, that's China, across Africa, India and others, both in physical engagements, inbound missions from those countries, outbound engagements to those countries, as well as then the digital engagement. So we promote the city of Durban through a range of digital platforms, through a range of publications, and through a range of channels and other media houses. So the biggest ones that we've been pushing into lately have been the UK, USA, and Asia, and we're seeing some good results of that.
I mean, you seem to be doing very well in that front. I'm saying this because there's a lot of investment that we see happening in our city. What is it that investors find attractive about Durban?
So maybe we've encapsulated it in an acronym. Some might have heard of this before.
Yeah.
We call that acronym All Hits, ALLHITS. And we feel those are the 7 competitive or comparative advantages that investors find interesting for the city of Durban. So we are still one of South Africa's most award-winning cities. In fact, one of Africa's most award-winning cities. So in spite of all the challenges and in spite of all of the problems, for example, eThekwini is still one of the few municipalities across the continent that still has AA investment grade ratings as part of its award collection. But moving very quickly through the other 7 items, L, we sit within one of the largest human resource pools in KwaZulu-Natal with some of the fastest skills development taking place. The University of KwaZulu-Natal is the 2nd largest direct contact university on the entire African continent. The next L in that All Hits acronym, we have a lifestyle here, a lifestyle of business and pleasure together, which is very unique. We fully concede there are other places in South Africa and across the continent that are of perhaps more business capitals and business giants. Conversely, we concede there may be other places that may be seen as more of a culture or tourism, but we have the best combination of those two things in one city. And that's reflective of us as humans. Part work, part entrepreneur, part corporate, part business, but also culture, lifestyle, family, sport and entertainment found in one city. The H, higher economic growth rates. We're a coastal metropolitan port city. And so that trend is a global trend. Coastal metropolitan port cities outperform national averages and many others. We've got infrastructure leadership, new airport, fiber optics, the port getting new international investors coming in. T, tourism crown. We just had the tourism in Durban again. We have the largest number of Southern African domestic tourists still choosing Durban. And S, we're a secondary city in South African terms, but we feel we're the most sustainable city with a good spread of sectors across primary, secondary and tertiary sectors. So there's a lot of suppliers, a lot of professional service organizations and potential markets for investors to find. So these all hits are what we like to pitch to the investors.
Yeah, so they don't call us a gateway to Africa for nothing.
Absolutely.
So tell me about, we've seen a lot of developments happening in the north of the city. We're talking about the recent one that has been completed, the Oceans Mall in Umhlanga. What other developments that we can expect in our city?
Starting again in the north, we still have a robust call center or contact center industry with investors expanding their operations there. Rewards Co was one recently that built an entire third building and are filling that third building up. Other elements that we've seen open in the north in the tourism and hospitality space, in addition to Oceans, we've seen the Arch development come out the ground. That's got the new Hilton Hotel attached to it. And there are also manufacturers, I can't mention their name at this point in time, but significant manufacturers. I can mention this one in particular, Heineken Group. They're looking at options in the north. So there are manufacturing investments coming in the north as well. But it's not only all about the north. The CBD and the west and the south. You know, Toyota and the industrial complex remain committed to the South Durban Basin, and we're working with them in terms of some of the suppliers and others that want to co-locate in the south. In the CBD here, I can confirm that we have international investors and local investors still repurposing a number of our buildings, still looking to increase the residential opportunities in the CBD, still looking to increase even in our Durban Point development. I can confirm the Malaysian investors are talking to other international investors at an advanced stage to accelerate multi-billion rand tourism, residential and commercial investments in that Durban Point area. So the CBD is still attracting a lot of attention. And then lastly, out in the west. Out in the west, we've seen recently again the headlines for that eThekwini development. Multifaceted development. I have engaged many times with the private investors there, and there's a lot of interest and a lot of commitment going into that, but also our existing investors. So out in the north, we have the likes of Rainbow Chickens. Rainbow Chickens themselves are doing about a 600 million rand expansion in their manufacturing facilities in the west. So there really is investment and development of concrete international investors and local investors in the north, south, central and the west.
You did mention earlier that part of your role or your responsibility as investor is to retain investment. We've seen this during COVID and the civil unrest. A lot of companies wanted to pull out. What did you promise them to stay in Durban?
Yeah, look, I think simply the way I answer that for people is it's important for us to try to find perspective, to keep perspective, and to retain and guard and defend that perspective. Durban is not the only city that's been through tough times. Most cities around the world have been through very tough times. COVID, weather patterns, we're seeing right now Russia and Ukraine, you know, so wars. So it's important for Durbanites and for South Africans to zoom out a little bit from our problems and keep perspective. It's not all bad. The glass is not completely empty. The glass is still half full is how I see it, and filling up. So we try to inject perspective into our existing investors and say the IMF have looked at the economic growth rates and projections for all the regions around the world. Sub-Saharan Africa is predicted for the next 3 years to have one of the highest economic growth rates globally. So where do you want your business to stay? Where do you want your business to be positioned to capitalize on that area? Other forms of perspective, our finances, the balance sheet of this particular city. It's one of the best still across the whole continent. So you need to be very careful with existing investors, not getting too caught up with the negative narratives or the negative headlines. Let's be honest, for hundreds of years now, it's bad news that sells newspapers.
Yeah.
So I liken it to the diet. If you are not eating enough vegetables and you're not getting enough good, healthy diet, then it's going to make you sick, and you don't want to jump out of a frying pan and land in a fire. So it's about fighting for perspective, keeping perspective, and understanding this world is in turmoil, and how can we work together and focus on the positives, focus on the opportunities. So some of the challenges that many cities are going through, on infrastructure, for example, we say to our existing investors, these challenges, you turn them over, they're becoming opportunities. Transnet is injecting international investors as shareholders into the Port of Durban. So turning those challenges into opportunities. The City of Durban, before this year is out, will be coming out for public-private partnership investment on energy and power, on wastewater treatment plants. These are multi-billion rand investment opportunities. So who better to capitalize on those other than Durban residents and Durban businesses themselves? So stick around, there's still a lot more we can do together.
Yeah, I mean, recently there was a quarterly labor survey report indicating that in terms of employment, there's an increase there. Will you attribute that to what are you guys doing at Invest Durban?
We can't take all the credit. You know, we sit within a system, within a system, within a system with a lot of different actors. So what I am happy to say is that, yes, our unemployment rates are coming down one of the fastest in the country. And so, yes, that is a function of that partnership between business leadership, between government leadership, community leadership, and faith-based leaders. You know, I always will also rope in faith-based leaders and the Amakosi. We've all been here for hundreds of years. We're all still going to be here for hundreds of years to come. And what's happening is we are closing ranks constructively. We're coming together and addressing our problems and finding opportunities in them. So it's the collective that's performing much tighter now than perhaps we were 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. Mr. Katsias, thank you so much for coming through. We really appreciate having you today. Maybe your parting shots?
Simpiwe, thanks very much. I appreciate the time, and I would encourage Durbanites and all across Mzansi, put your hope in front of you, lead constructively, and fight for that perspective. There are pockets of good news. Don't be overwhelmed and consumed by the bad news.
Well, that's all we had for you this week. Do join us next week for another edition of eThekwini Matters.